I'm not paying attention.
Count of three and it comes on.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. How are you? It's good to see. It's good to see everyone. I know everybody's really busy, and just wanted to also let everyone know how much we appreciate everything that you do on a daily basis to uplift our young scholars and one another, right? So thank you for that. That said, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order at 4:30 p.m. And Ms. Hill, do you mind leading us in the pledge this evening and our moment of silence? Perfect. All right, moving on to 3.1, Student Academic, Behavioral, and Emotional Support Systems. Dr. Reynolds, do you want to kind of kick us off there and we'll move?
Well, thank you, President Sandoval, Governing Board, Cabinet, and guests. It's a pleasure to be here this evening to be able to talk about some of the things that our district is doing to support our students, their academic, their behavioral, and their emotional needs. As we continue to navigate the pandemic. We are very pleased to be in a situation right now that feels a little better than it did the last month. January was, beginning of February was very challenging for schools across the state, and definitely Peoria is no different. So our staff, our students are able to take a little bit of a breath, and we're very hopeful that over the next few months we're going to be able to dive in and begin that recovery. It feels like we have sort of started and paused our recovery several times over the last 2 years, where we feel like we're ready to really dive in and be able to recover from the lost opportunities that our students have had and the gaps that they've had in their learning. And then we ride that wave and it comes in and we have experience a lot of absenteeism, those kinds of things, and it slows that down. So Dr. Davidson, Dr. Bell are here this evening to be able to talk and walk you through some of the things that we're working on.
All right. We'll welcome you three. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you. And President Sandoval, members of the board, community, tonight's presentation certainly will be driven by our slideshow. You have Dr. Bell and myself. We do have members of our SEL team behind me just as support and just to be here if we had any specific questions. But I guess what I want to start off with, and I think Ms. Hill, you had asked for a conversation on the social emotional learning program and what we do here. And certainly we're going to be able to hopefully give a lot of information and answer any questions that any of our board members might have. But as Dr. Reynolds was talking about coming through the pandemic and working hard to meet the needs of students, what I hope to present tonight is, along with Dr. Bell, is a comprehensive system of support for students, both academically and behaviorally and socially, all of the above. And really, this is a system, a research-based model, multi-tier system of support. You'll hear me say that, MTSS, that's meeting the needs of our kids and all of our students. And it is something that is being done in a manner that is comprehensive, not just in response to a global pandemic. So I just want to make that clear as we start tonight's presentation. And also, board members and Dr. Reynolds, if there's any questions, we'll take those as we move forward, okay? The first piece, and one of the most important pieces, is just the reference to our strategic plan there. And this MTSS conversation tonight really falls in a couple of places quite easily, increasing student achievement as well as offering safe and welcoming schools to our students. In response to the SEL portion of this system, I guess, I want you to see the variety of team members that we have that support the behavioral and emotional needs of our students. I would add, as I started the conversation, academic as well, but these individuals up there on the screen really fall under my department, and just wanted you to have access to the numerous team members there that are really making certain our kids have success and are in a safe and welcoming school. If you happen to look at the numbers there, that's just simply telling you how many of those individuals are part of that team. To define MTSS, again, as I said earlier, this system addresses academic and social, emotional areas. One of the things that we've been working hard over last year, I think, Dr. Bell, we started, and it just remains a part of who we are in Peoria, and that we're trying to demonstrate that a child's needs are comprehensive and that you really don't break down behavior and academics in silos, that we work in concert together to make sure our students are successful. And you can see just some of the items there that we use to support our students. And there's two that I'll highlight, and those the second and third to the end there. Progress monitoring of our students, as well as data-driven decision-making. Through this system, and that goes for academics and behavior, we are attempting to and working hard to use data that drives our decisions. How are our students performing? How are they behaving? And if they're not behaving, what data are we using to demonstrate where there is a particular need? And just constant monitoring is very important. And I think we know that as educators and parents. We're always looking how students are doing, how our children are doing, and how we can intervene to support them. And lastly, as I started off as well, just highlighting that this is for every single student in our district.
Dr. Davidson.
Mr. Sandoval, sir, yes.
So when we talk about the data, what are some of the ways that the district is, collecting the data, right? So we have a list in front of us that shows all of our community partners. And so that's one way, right, as our partners engage with the district and students and what that feedback looks like and that information and how that gets cascaded down to the district level to be able to make those data-driven decisions. In addition to, are we also using surveys like to students and just to kind of leverage that channel to get a pulse, right, on how they're feeling?
Thank you, Mr. Sandoval. And you stole some of my thunder from my presentation, but I'll share with you that there are some slides in the near future that showcase some of those data sets. We've worked hard over the last many years to capture the voice of our students, so you'll see that in tonight's presentation about what they're saying their needs are and how to support them. Certainly from my office, the instructional support side, we're looking at our discipline data, what's happening from an in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, month over month across our campuses, looking for best practices, ways to support our students. I know that threat assessments, you'll see that data here. That's a data set that tells us what's going on with our students, in particular across all of our grade levels. So there's a variety of data sets that I would use from that social emotional piece. I know Dr. Bell will probably speak to a variety of data sets. I don't know, Kendra, if you want to do that now, just what data sets we're using to support students and academics.
In a recent, can you hear me?
Perfect.
Thank you. In a recent report to the board, Mike and I submitted a academic assessment plan that really tries to capture where the kids are in terms of what they've learned for grade level standards, the transcend benchmark assessments, and then also any skill gaps that they have from previous grade levels. And so our assessment plan is aligned to both the standards and the skill level of where the student is. It's been important for us, and I think we talked about this briefly last time when we talked about the summer program. That's really critical for us to understand the skill gap as well, because if kids are reading below grade level, 1 grade level below, 2 grade levels below, we have to address that in a pretty prescribed manner. And so that kind of sets the stage for whether kids need additional time and support to learn the standards, Tier 2, or in fact they have a skills deficit that requires a much more intensive plan, which would be a Tier 3 if in fact they're reading 2 grade levels below, as an example. So our assessment plan is designed to capture that data and really help us identify students for tiered interventions.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
So Dr. Bell used the term tiers, and for those out there that may not be familiar with this concept, or even for those here tonight, you can see the tiers is almost a funnel. The larger portion of the funnel being what I would say is a universal design, something that all students need access to, whether that's academic or behavior. And we list just a few examples of those things that we would view in a tier one, from a tier one perspective. As you furthered that funnel, you would assume that less students need those supports, as you see in tier two and in tier three. And we highlight a few of those items that are applicable for both academics or an SEL portion of our support system. The rest of the presentation is going to follow the conversation of tiers. So I will present information on tier one behavioral supports for our students and some data sets, some information as we move forward. Dr. Bell will follow with conversation on the tiers that relates to academics, okay? But I want to make certain we have a good foundation from a tier perspective. Do we have any questions from our board members on the tiered model? Okay, all right, thank you. A really important piece to the tiers, and you can I think this will all make sense to you. I did provide hard copies for our governing board, so you have this because the writing is a little small in the presentation tonight. But this happened well before my time when we really started examining the ways in which we want to support our students with social emotional needs or behavioral needs. Our team created these funnels, and I guess the thing I wanted to highlight as it relates to a tiered system of support, you can see that we do not do our work in isolation. When we're working on behalf of our students, we engage all of these stakeholders to ensure that our kids are as successful as they can be. So just a really important piece. This is a team effort, is what I'd like to highlight. Okay? Dr. Bell.
Thank you. To add to the comments around the tiers, it is typical in this research-based model that tier one should meet the needs of about 80% of the kids, and then 15% of those kids may need additional time and support from the teacher or teacher team to grasp or master that particular learning target. Students then in tier three would be about the remaining 5, possibly up to 10%. We know that because of some of the learning loss and what we've experienced the past 2 years, that the numbers in tier 2 and tier 3, those percentages have increased. And so it's not as simple to say that we're able to provide those kinds of interventions in that 10 or 5% range. We have more kids with more needs. And so it's critical for us to be able to identify those kids through a variety of tools that we use, and also progress monitor students through the learning experience, or in fact through social emotional needs and how we access those. So the point I want to make, in addition to what Dr. Davidson has shared, is tier one is essential. And really, the lack of good first instruction will only put a heavier weight on tier 2 and tier 3. So the focus on those priority standards and the focus on making sure that we have schedules that ensure that every single student has access to tier 1 instruction is really critical. So there's been more attention to subpopulation groups to ensure that we're not removing special education kids out of tier 1 to go to special education resource during reading or during the launch lesson in mathematics. So those kids need the tier 1 plus 2 plus specialized instruction, etc. So we have to be very, very intentional about laying the groundwork for academics for tier 1 for all students. The same, we would say, on the social emotional side.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. So from a behavioral support perspective, again, as Dr. Bell said, Tier 1, every student having access to a safe learning environment from this perspective. I just wanted to highlight a few of the bullets there. First and foremost, that our students know what's expected of them. I think that applies to the academic arena as well, but from a behavioral perspective, our kids need to know how to act, how to behave, and what we expect from them. Secondly, and I think probably even as important, do they have access to a caring adult? One of the things we talk to our principals about is to ensure that someone on that campus can connect and should connect and will connect with the student, no matter what their needs are. And lastly, as it says here, have access to restorative practices, meaning when something goes wrong, because sometimes it does, how can we engage that student and their families to ensure that they come back to us in a manner that allows for a change of behavior, that if there was a victim involved, that victim feels comfortable with that relationship and ensuring that they're in a safe learning environment. It really goes hand in hand, but that's what that means from a restorative practice perspective. And I'll share a little bit more as we move forward here. Here are some actions over the last couple of years that our team from a social and emotional behavioral support team has put together. And we'll just highlight a few of these items here. Our district student support line, our students have access to call in if there's a need, and that is answered. That is not left unattended, and so we can provide that support to students as needed. You see a little bit there about a Tier 1 model frameworks, I call them, for our students. You've heard the term PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention and Support, another research-based model. And we have a few schools that are using that framework as their universal design for behavioral supports. You see that we have 11 schools that went through the well-managed schools curriculum, and so that is their Tier 1 model for teaching and reinforcing behavior on their campuses. Some other things that exist out in our schools, capturing kids' hearts, the character counts framework. So we have a variety of frameworks that are out there in our schools to support students and behavior. I think another thing that we've already alluded to is that last bullet there. How are we capturing the voice of our students? And many of my colleagues behind me have been supporting this endeavor, and I'd like to show you, I guess it's 2 slides from now, what they've captured from the voice of our students. It's very powerful, and it kind of gives you a sense of the why behind the work that we're doing to support behavior.
Dr. Davidson, quick
Yes, sir.
question for you on bullet point number 2. You talk about the different, I'm going to call them, well, you're calling them site initiatives, right?
Or frameworks, yes, sir.
Frameworks, okay. So some of our schools have PBIS, looks like 11 schools are using the well-managed schools curriculum. So my question is this, I'm assuming the framework or initiative that's being used at a particular site is based on that site's need. And I could be wrong. So maybe that's question 1. And then 2, as we continue along, recovering and restoring, how are the sites collaborating, right? And I'm making this up. So PBIS, let's say, is at, 4 of our sites, but there's a site 5 and 6 who is seeing kind of a very similar outcome, if you will, of what we've been through over the last couple of years. How is everybody collaborating, right? And to even leverage the knowledge base of these different frameworks and initiatives in light of every site being so thin, right, from a staff perspective and leadership perspective. So I guess that's really my question.
That's a big question, sir. One that I think is really important, and I didn't say it on the last slide.
Oh, sorry.
No, but this is a real important piece, is you are correct that our schools are unique. The leadership teams, the communities. So often what you see our schools implementing is together and is unique to that campus, Mr. Sandoval. So right now we have not come out as a district, and I know how my team members behind me feel. We haven't come out and said every school must do this framework. But what we have said is every school needs to make certain that they have a Tier 1 environment that meets these demands. And so that's done in a variety of ways, as you noted on this last slide. But that's the key. Those are the key principles there that we need our schools to have. And so when you talk about collaborating and working together, that's an area that we, for those of us that are supporting our schools, continually go back to. how are you doing these things? And if we're not seeing that, what can we do better? And I think just overall, we are striving in furthering our alignment. We're not there yet. We can do better and will do better on ensuring that we have those opportunities for collaboration around our Tier 1 behavior supports and all the way through. But we're working through that.
Perfect, thank you. Do you mind going back one slide?
Yes, sir.
So, the last bullet, we'll have access to a caring adult on campus, and I guess really it's all of them. Can you talk a little bit about how this is being communicated to the sites, right? And here's why I'm asking the question. There's that saying that, states, every student is one caring adult away from being a success story, right? So, and we have many different, we're the largest employer in the city of Peoria. We have, over 4,000 associates who sit in very different seats, right? From certified to classified, from a crossing guard to maintenance, et cetera, where that positive relationship may be, with a crossing guard or a person in maintenance. How is that conversation, or how is this conversation being had with the sites to ensure that those individuals, the crossing guard or the maintenance person or coach or whatever, has a lane, or if it's a weekly meeting with leadership and those who need to hear, right? Maybe what is maybe kind of a main heartburn, if you will, or some situation that a student is in. How that kind of gets cascaded down to the right team, right? In other words, is each site have like a kind of our COVID response team, like a restorative team, and then all this information kind of cascades down to them. I guess really that's kind of the question. If you can talk about that.
Sure, and Mr. Sandoval, I think you will see it probably in just a couple of slides where we refer to our student support teams.
I promise. I did look at the deck before coming here. So
I just want
for
the
I'm not
globally.
trying to step ahead, but
You're prepping me for my
right,
slides,
perfect.
so I appreciate that.
All
But we do have student support teams on campus, and you'll see that more inside of a Tier 2 situation where a student has presented with a particular need, and so we really try to refine the opportunities for the adults on campus to engage with those students. But from a global perspective, having worked alongside Ms. Vesely in Human Resources, we start that conversation at point of hire, so that when you come to Peoria, you know that we have an expectation that you work hard and do your job well, but you also connect positively with students and those that you serve, that you are here, no matter what role you're in, to work on behalf of our students. So it starts there in all seriousness. You bet from that perspective, yeah. But from an engaging with, I think that student support team and the leadership at our schools, our administrative team, are always looking for ways to connect our children to certain adults. And as you know, 22 of our campuses, we have social workers. Those individuals play key roles in helping to establish those relationships, and sometimes just serving as that one go-to person. But I know that's a conversation that many of our team members that you saw, and I think it was slide number 2, are out serving in those roles, but also finding avenues for students to check in, check out, just to have positive relationships on that campus. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I just have one question, kind of in piggybacking on what President Sandoval said around the collaboration or between the different models and frameworks that you're using. I understand that schools are individual and that they need to have their own, opportunities or frameworks that fit the school. But I just wondered, how do we ensure that there is alignment about some of those very, sort of basic behavioral expectations? Because I know that, from school to school, from administration to administration, things can be really different. But I think as a district, it's really important that we do have at least some kind of shared, standardized expectations. Right. And I just wanted to kind of throw that out there and get your response.
Well, I hope you see, Ms. Underhill, that these are kind of those universal, those expectations of framework. But I do know that our team and those behind me, we've worked hard to work alongside our principals and ask them if they're going to engage in something that falls in the behavioral world, whether that's a school-wide support framework, whether it's a curriculum, or, hey, I met I went to a conference and I saw this speaker, and they'd be great for my kids. We've been asking them for them to give us that information in advance so that our team can kind of look through it, work through it to determine if that's something we want to have as part of our SEL framework. So we are working towards better alignment, as I said, but I think our teams are working alongside us with that.
And
Appreciate that. I just, like, that to me seems pretty open, like, access to behavioral expectations, but, what are our shared expectations? And I know it's outlined in the handbook and all those things.
That's right. I
but
was just gonna
wanna
say, we've
make
got-
sure that that is also, taken into consideration, so.
And we do have those, we have the parent-student handbook that,
Yes, sir.
that lays out many of those expectations. So obviously our philosophy is to move from, even its own funnel, where this is the top, and it moves through the parent-student handbook, and then it funnels down even more specific to each site and their individual needs.
All right, thank you. Let's see. So I wanted to highlight this, and you saw the term earlier, restorative practices. That's a term that's out there that's being used. And I wanted to highlight just for the global community as a whole, we have not adopted a program called restorative practices. That we did have some training with our administrative team and talked about what does that mean? What is restorative practice as it relates to behavior? And there you can see there's a little bit of a definition, but also some key words that tie into restoring a relationship, restoring a situation that has gone bad. And you see in relationship, respect, responsibility, repair, and reintegration. And what I have learned through in a restorative model, and I think we're all wise enough, we've been in different situations that have not always gone the way we hoped. There's many different variables to it, and many different people are impacted. As you see here, it's the person who caused the harm, the recipient of the harm, and the community perhaps that is being felt by that harm. And so when our administrators are asked to restore, it's sometimes as simple as a conversation. Sometimes it might be bringing that student support team together and talking about, wow, student, young person, you engage in this behavior, you're coming back to our school, how are you going to be successful? What do we need to do? Sometimes it might be, there's just so many different things that can come into that, but that's the premise behind restorative practices, making certain that we can come back and continue with this whole thing called student learning, which is why we're here in the first place. But I just wanted to give our team a little bit of information on that, and just know we're looking to provide additional training as we move throughout this concept. Right now, our administrators have only been trained on restorative circles. It's one out of, I believe, 3 components to restorative practices, and that can be done at the beginning of class. That can be done as during transitions, and that's really just an opportunity for the students and the teacher to have positive conversation about what's going on in class, what's happening, what are some things we need to problem solve, and that's really the premise behind that, just creating that safe and welcoming environment. But just want to make sure we knew that.
I guess I was wondering with the restorative practices, that still includes consequences, though, obviously, I presume, right?
Yes,
so
ma'am.
there's more to it than just, obviously, we do want the students to, make amends and that sort of thing and understand each other, but depending on, what actually happened in that specific instance, that there would actually still be consequences possibly for, okay, great.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
And Dr. Reynolds talked about the handbook. I know we speak to our behavior and the consequences, the matrix or the scope of consequences that can occur. This is more about, first of all, I'd probably say if we're doing our restorative circles, there's a little bit of a proactive approach there, so we don't get into those hot messes, but then you're correct, consequences are given for certain actions, and then upon return, we want our students to have success.
I think this is probably along the same lines, but I just always wondered, and I'm just throwing this out there, obviously we do have kids that get suspended for various activities that they've done something wrong. And I just wonder if, depending on what actually transpired, depending on, the level of how, whatever they did wrong, if there would be a possibility, instead of suspending all the kids, that we could find another way to, get them to have some sort of a deterrent. Like maybe they could, do the not fun thing, like help out the janitor, clean up the school, or, help out with maintenance. And, it gives not only is a deterrent, but then it also gives them, respect for maybe some of the other people that work at the school. And, I've just wondered about that. Ironwood always comes to mind because they have such a, they have a long rap sheet, that school. They have a lot of suspensions. When I compare them to Centennial, which is a similar size school, their suspension list is big, and it's shocking. And I just wonder sometimes with these kids that do things that they shouldn't be doing, that, we give them a suspension and like, yay, that's what I wanted, now I don't have to go to school. And so that, depending on what happened, of course, if they were harming someone else, definitely, we don't want them back in school. But, I was just wondering, have we ever considered doing something a little, thinking outside the box to try to get those, kind of loop them back in instead of losing these kids as they fall through the cracks, as far as trying to kind of get them back and get them to have respect for themselves and the school and the institution and, kind of rethinking it.
Mrs. Hill, you just described restorative practice. That's right. You said it in a perfect way. That's exactly the idea behind restoring, right? And it works in tandem with some more traditional consequences. But that's exactly what we want our schools to be doing, is to look and find other ways. We know, 5-day, 6-day, 8-day, 9-day suspensions, if they worked, we wouldn't be seeing much of the behaviors that we do see. So we want to use some of these alternative approaches when a child makes a poor choice. And we're speaking about student discipline or student behaviors here, but restorative is right. That's how we want to act as adults as well, and model that. And adults have conflicts as well, and how do we, when we approach those relationships, approach them from a restorative standpoint as well. So.
And Ms. Hill and team, I would add, we have some high schools right now that have found ways to use their staff to work with students who are struggling with different things. And the one that comes to my mind is attendance, tardies. Working through our habitual, offenders of being tardy at school. The last thing you want to do to a student who's tardy is, okay, you're going to be out of school. So that doesn't make any, right? So finding ways to bring them into the conversation, their families, and to kind of go to that root cause of what's driving that problem so that they can get to school on time. So there's a lot to that, but I know our high schools are working hard to find those ways to restore and to, I guess the other term I would use that when you were speaking was to have just logical consequences. Right. Consequences that make sense and perhaps deter them from wanting to do those things. Clean it up. Yep.
And Dr. Davidson, these are really, really important conversations. We're on tier 1.
Well,
I'm just saying, we get two more tiers to run through, so I just want to keep us.
Well, real quick though, so we're going to stay on tier 1 just for a second. I mean, because I realize that we don't have a formal restorative practices initiative framework, right, as a district. But for me, as we take a look at alternative means to shift a behavior, my hope is that we would focus on growth versus just punitive measures, right? Meaning, learning and understanding, what the infraction was, right? And then have them go through some type of a, group type setting with others who may have similar infractions and where they're actually learning something. And Ms. Hill brought up, where they may go home and say, great, I get to go home and play video games, but versus sending a student home, let's send them to, and if the infraction was, vaping or whatever, they go through some type of, course, class that, again, changes the behavior in a more long-term and infinite type mindset versus, some of the other thoughts that are out there, that would be more punitive and where, it might not shift their way of thinking, right? I guess where I'm headed is the last couple of years, our students have been through a ton. Mm-hmm. And, I just, you have kids whose families, due to the the pandemic, may have lost jobs or now are maybe, a foster student or McKinney-Vento, et cetera, right? There's just so many variables, that a student may be, acting out. And I've always said, our ability to look beyond what's right in front of us to truly understand, why a student is acting the way they are, is important. And I realize, our teachers are strapped, right, to be able to develop and continue along with those types of healthy relationships in the classroom because they're covering our other classes. I know it's tough right now, but I think, in these times, if we are truly wanting to restore, leading with that compassion and understanding where and why, I think will lead to more sustainable and long-term impacts.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me share with you on the next slide before Dr. Bell speaks to Tier 2, a little bit of information from the work that my team has done in capturing the voice of our students. We've done some work with both at the middle school and the high school level there. And then you see we have MAPS, which is Middle Schools Advocating in Peoria Schools. And we also have SEATS, which stands for Students Engaging with Administrators, Teachers, and Staff. We gave you a little bit of information there on the left side of how we did it with facilitators, the campuses impacted. But the things I really wanted to highlight for you are the things on the right. At the middle school level, opportunities for growth. And Mr. Sandoval, the students, I should say, recognize bullet number 1, that to do this work, we need the staff. So I appreciate your advocacy for our team, but it takes people. It takes that human capital to provide the support and the services for the students that are with us. So I think it's great that our own kids saw that. At the middle school, there's some student behaviors that they see that are out there that need to be addressed and worked towards. And then it was also fun, I think, in looking at that data, some of the school-based items that they were concerned about, such as the cafeteria food and dress code. That's coming from our middle school students. The high school students gave us some additional data, and that's right below that. These are some stressors that they're facing. First and foremost, look at number 1, mental health, stress and anxiety. For those of us that have high school students at home, we can speak to that as well. But that certainly came out loud and clear. The way social media impacts them, the way they're impacted by, we titled it cyberbullying, but just the different interactions that exist inside the social media environment is tough on our students. And lastly, culture and identity. Our students across our high schools all come with so many diverse backgrounds. And in some cases, they struggled to find their way. They struggled to fit in, and that came out loud and clear. So this here goes back to some of the things we've already said, but out of anything, this is the why. Why are we supporting our students? Because they have needs. They're working through some hard things, and we can't let that go unrecognized. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Dr. Bell.
I think David and Rebecca already took us into some solid Tier 2 examples. Tier 2 is the key mantra here is providing students additional support and time for that intervention. It could be an anti-vaping course or discussion. It could be small group instruction or an intervention related to they didn't quite master that particular concept. Again, on the behavioral side or social emotional side, kids may need additional time and support from that caring adult. Moving on to the next slide, the one thing I wanted to add to what Carter was talking about in this system, whether it's academic or behavior, this is a school-wide collective commitment to intervention. And so obviously we do the Tier 1 instruction, we do Tier 2 and Tier 3, but this is a system that each school actually creates, gathers those collective commitment statements from staff to intervene when kids need it, regardless of what that intervention is, if it's academic, reading, or in fact a social emotional. So the teams that are in place at schools determine the frequency and duration. Some kids may need a reading intervention for, in the case of summer school, 18 days to really help them grow in their reading level. Other kids may not need an intervention. that is that lengthy. So those student support teams at the site are critical in not only identifying students academically and behaviorally, but making a plan for that intervention. Carter.
Dr. Bell? Sorry, can I just ask a question about that? So from my experience, I understand that how important those small groups are, but I also recognize that with all the other stuff that we have going on this year with the behaviors and everything else, that effectively implementing those small groups in some situations is just literally not feasible. And I know that, and I know teachers know that. And I think additionally adding on additional data and progress monitoring onto that situation is also strictly unfeasible. So I think, and I'm back to where you're at and what the kids say, that we need additional staff, we need additional adults, we need additional people to support these teachers and these kids, because we can all say we're going to do small group and we're going to have intervention, but when we're in a class of 30 and we've got 5 that we've pulled and we've got 25 doing God knows what, because they're still all, trying to figure out what school's like again too, it's just not feasible like it used to be maybe, 5 years ago or, 3 years ago. So I just feel like that's a great model. That's what we've always relied on, small groups. That's what we do, right? That's how we work with kids and meet their needs. But with our situation, what it is, and it's not anybody's fault, it's just, I don't feel like that's literally something that can be successful in every classroom. And we keep saying it. I think we need to figure out a way that we can put some resources behind that to make that actually feasible. So, and I think this all speaks to what other models are we going to look at to really make some changes for our kids. And I think that this whole pandemic has just really brought those needs to the forefront. So I just wanted to say that.
I think those comments are excellent, and it has been a struggle for teachers. We have provided professional development in things like station rotation with current resources that will help teachers as kids move, and we can break down the groups a little bit better, particularly in reading and mathematics. We also added reading teachers through our ESSER funds this year that helped quite a few schools to be able to access a full-time reading teacher that they otherwise hadn't been able to access prior to this. So we have made some inroads. I know it's challenging, and it's even more challenging because, again, as we talked about, the percentage of kids that need those additional supports, additional time, additional support have increased. We'll talk a little bit more about summer programming, which is, as we talked about at a board meeting, will be pretty robust again this year for that reason. So we're just still, working hard, working with our teachers in order to give them the supports they need.
I just wanted to mention, I know there is a program that's happening at Oakwood, and it's an offshoot because of a really dedicated teacher there who has just kind of created the program and found some outside funding herself. But I think we need to be looking at those things. She's serving almost 100 kids a day because of the schedule, and she only works like 2/3 time, but she's seeing tremendous growth. So I guess I'm just, and that's because she's pulling kids out, you know what I mean?
Right.
In small groups, in an isolated area, not with the, the rest of it all going on. So I just hope that we can continue to look at those things, and I'm not, I know that we're doing the best we can, but I just hope we'll keep pushing forward on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
From a Tier 2 perspective, and Mr. Sandoval, you highlighted this earlier, our student support teams, and just making certain that we all are aware of the different team members that are coming together at times to work on behalf of our students and our families. And you can see that's why I put ad hoc there, because it depends on the situation, who's at the table, who's conversing about the student at the time. But you can see we have a variety of support personnel members. To Ms. Underhill's point, we need all those people. And staffing is hard right now. It's just a tough environment for staff. So we're always looking for quality, trained individuals who want to support our students. Just a plug for those that want to come work with us. So, okay.
Dr. Davidson, could you go
Yes,
back
sir.
to that slide? Do we have a BI at every school?
Right now, I want to say no. I'm going to turn to my team in the back just to be safe. I didn't think we did. Dr. Sorensen, no. We don't have social workers at every school either. Obviously, we've had conversation about school counselors. Those primarily are seen at the high schools, and we know that their time is limited in the way in which they would partake in a student support team, but they are a very important team member. But Yes, sir. And thank you. I guess by no means was I trying to say we have one at every campus. Those are just team members that could make up that student support team.
Are those BIs restricted to our special education population?
I think that their primary concern are for those students with disabilities. I would say, though, knowing many of them, they're supporting a student when a student is in need.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. This speaks a little bit to the student support team and how we use it. Certainly, we have to talk about what is or isn't working at the Tier 1 level from a behavioral, social, emotional need of the student. We're working right alongside the parents and recommending interventions. We talked about data collection, and I think an important piece to this before we dig into more specialized intervention, as Ms. Underhill talked in the academic perspective, a small group, before we do something behaviorally, we want to make certain that the student has access to everything in Tier 1 as well. And really determine was that in place and did it work or didn't it work before we move on to an additional intervention. So here's a data set for us that speaks to some Tier 2 efforts, some work of our student support teams, some work of our behavioral support teams that exist. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of historical data. And when we talk about the needs of our students, we do have a threat management process in our district that, based on a variety of things, in particular, things that have happened in other states, other cities, we do take our threats made by students, staff alike, but very seriously. And this demonstrates to you that there is a need out there, that our students, whether that's a verbal, a physical threat, we address it, and we bring teams together to address it. Certainly we engage with our parents and any other resources we may need. But you can see just year over year, and that 46 is to date in middle February. So we know that the needs are out there, and I just wanted to give you that from a Tier 2 perspective. Some other things that we do with the student support team, we support students with 504 accommodation plans. Those are for our general education students who have some disabling conditions. We certainly document that and work with teams to help those students, as well as we just wanted to highlight the work of our social workers, where they are available, how they often do that small group work, as well as individual, but are working right alongside our administrator teams. Okay. Dr. Bell, I think we're going to Tier 3, please.
Thank you. As mentioned before, the purpose of Tier 3 is that intensive remediation. This is typically beyond the scope of that Tier 1 classroom. This is a pullout, as Ms. Underhill mentioned, model sometimes when kids need that Tier 3. So that reading teacher, as an example, might pull the kid, not during reading instruction in Tier 1, but at a different time. So that's why that schedule is important. The kids still have to have access to some of that grade level content. That said, they may pull students for a reading intervention, research-based reading intervention instruction, say 30 minutes at a time. So those are some examples on the academic side of intensive remediation. Mike works with principal cluster groups to look at that data on a regular basis. So we're identifying those students as we move forward who are in need of intensive remediation. At this point, we have assessed all of our students mid-year K-8 and have those identification pieces in place. So we're identifying students now for Tier 3 intervention during the month of June. I'll also add during the month of June, that'll be that corrective reading. That's an example of a program that's research-based that we'll be using during our targeted instruction over the summer. And again, progress monitoring so that we can assess how did we do? Where did the students come into the program? Where are they exiting, not only during the school year, but during that summer programming. We'll also be offering the Bridge program for incoming kindergartners, and maybe even more importantly, offering that bridge program from our 8th grade students going into high school so we can begin to establish that caring relationship between high school teachers and young people as they move from middle school to high school.
I guess I had a quick question too. I realize when you get to the point of having to utilize Tier 3 for certain students that we have to, basically pull out all the stops just to get them up to speed. I personally believe that if we don't get the parents involved, there's only so far we can go. I don't know what all we're able to do or how much we're trying to incorporate the families and the parents. And I've just noticed over the years, parents are very apathetic. They are not as involved with their kids', lives and their schoolwork and their personal lives, I think, as they should be. I mean, I really think if there's some way we could try to get to the parents somehow. I mean, it shouldn't be I don't believe it should be the full responsibility of our district to, get our kids, yes, we do teach kids, obviously, that's what we do, but, a lot of this has to start in the home. I really think so. I mean, we gotta, but like I said, I guess my big question is there something we're trying to do to encourage families, parents, to be actively involved and doing maybe a little bit more at home or just, being present, that sort of thing, even volunteering, whatever that, looks like. So I'm just wondering where we're at with that type of scenario.
We began talking with principals and small group clusters in last month and looking at that data in preparation for parent-teacher conferences. We know that partnership is going to be critical. 18 days is not going to take the place of a gap that's 1 to 2 years below grade level. So we do need resources and strategies, even laptops, technology, at-home curriculum for use, and make sure that parents are able to access this and understand how to do that. So Danielle and team even worked with us to help us provide some toolkits, if you will, for principals and teachers around that communication with parents, because that engagement, you're right, is going to be critical to catch kids up.
So it sounds like we actually give kits home and that sort of thing because as a parent, obviously, of a kid, I mean, if you need to, you do supplementals or you do other extra work at home over the summer, on weekends, whatever you need to do to give your kid the best advantage to get them up to speed so they can be successful. So that's great if we're offering kits and options for parents and encouraging them to do as much as they can, to help out because we can't be a one-man show. We can't do it all. And we shouldn't want to. I mean, we want parents to be actively involved with their kids. So thank you.
I would add, I don't know if this is on or not, I would add a little bit to that in terms of Title I.
Is it on?
Sounds like it's on.
That not on?
No.
Sorry.
Okay, so Title I schools all have a parent involvement process as part of their spending. An example would be they have K-3 reading night where they invite the parents in and they literally give them a book and then they show them how they read with the student to what they're looking for. So they not only train the student and train the teacher trained, but they train the parents on how to read books with them and show them what things you're looking for. This is comprehension. This is the way you work with the letters. This is the way you work with the numbers to move them through the process. And I know that that is part of all our Title I plans, and there's specific money designed especially to do that.
Very good. Thank you.
A quick question, Mr. Moss, you brought up Title I schools. In earlier conversations, we were talking about, our ability, or really our teachers' ability to create those healthy relationships, with our students. And one of the things I brought up before, pre-pandemic is, when we take a look at our Title I sites, there are many dynamics at a Title I site, or Title I sites definitely, without question, host, the majority of our more vulnerable students, correct? So you take a look at that, I mean, in our class sizes at Title I schools, as we have gone through the pandemic, as certain grade levels, let's say, have, maybe lost a number of students versus getting rid of a section and making one classroom still at, 30, 32 kids. Should we be thinking, again, at Title I schools, of, reducing our class sizes, to 17, 18 versus, cutting it down to one section? I guess as a thought, as we move forward, as we strategize to restore, I realize there's a business model and it probably takes a certain number of kids to accommodate, square feet. But for me, it still comes, look, I know budget from a public school perspective and system, it's tough without question, and it could be tougher. But what I do love that we have done over, the last couple years is how we've continued to prioritize people. And meaning all of the people that we are responsible for, which including our students. And as we take a look at the dynamics of all of our sites, and I've always said all of our sites have a story, right? And we're in this same storm, but everybody's ship or boat is a little bit different. And if we can continue, to look at those sites that serve our most vulnerable kids differently than our other sites, we are truly standing behind our mantra of every student every day, which means looking at our Title I schools and ways that we can manage those class sizes so all of our students are put in a position to be successful. So I guess my ask and my push is, as we take a look at the data and the information that's coming in from all of the channels that we've talked about, our parents, our students, our teachers, and staff, let's also consider the dynamics of, some of our sites where, we may need to shift, how we manage those sites, from a, class size perspective in this case. And I'm sure there's other dynamics and other variables, but class size for sure.
Yeah, President Sandoval, you bring up a really great point. Our team does a really good job of doing exactly what you just talked about outside of class size. The challenge, obviously, with class size is we don't have enough teachers to fill the classrooms we currently have. If we chose to, we could lower our class size to 20, right? 15. We have to have the people to be able to fill those classrooms. And that is the significant challenge that we face across the district, regardless of Title I or non-Title I schools. But it is, as Mrs. Underhill brought up earlier, those opportunities to find people to support our students. It is a significant challenge we face right now, the people being out there and available to come support us. So we're going to continue to look for creative ideas and continue to be creative in how we support all of our schools, but specifically our Title I schools as well.
No, I appreciate that, and I'm with you. Yes, we need people, staff to be able to, manage and teach, have a certified individual in all of our classrooms, right? All I'm asking is, if we have the people, really my ask is, as we move forward, there are a lot of learnings that we realized over the last couple of years. And before the pandemic, I think there was knowledge that we had with respect to our Title I schools where, where we can still be better, right? And with this additional knowledge, as we move forward, yes, staffing is an issue for sure, and I get it. I just want to make sure that we're sensitive, to those sites that have shifting needs and different needs than some of our other sites. So, thank you.
Could I just say one thing? I just find it interesting so far that we're talking about Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and we're talking about a guaranteed viable curriculum, and we haven't really mentioned the PLC process once. And I know that we have a half-day Wednesdays, and I'll just be curious to see how that is embedded and how we measure that, and if we truly are a district that is a PLC or not, and if we believe in that or not. And I know we've spent budget money on bringing experts in, so Either we're about it or we're not, and how that fits into the quantifiable goals of academic performance that you've talked about. Because if you're Title I or not, if you have the human capital, as I agree with Corey, or not, that process is also research-based, but we can adopt research-based principles, and if we don't do it with validity, then it's not really research-based. So I'll just be curious and find it interesting that that hasn't come up yet when we talked about Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 instruction.
No, thank you for bringing that up. You know, as we enter, or I'm moving into the end of year 2 as a superintendent. I think if you ask leaders around the district, they are very aware that one of my top priorities and expectations is that we will be a highly effective professional learning community. That is an expectation of mine. We're clearly have not been able to do the work in that area that we would have liked to have done over the last year and a half, just given everything that's going on. But it is absolutely an expectation, and one that we're going to continue to work on, because it is absolutely an important aspect of how we design our instruction.
All right. As we end our presentation tonight, and certainly we'll stand for additional questions, I wanted to highlight Tier 3 behavioral supports. The key term that I bolded for us tonight is that these are for concerns that go beyond the typical scope of what we do in our schools, in our classroom, and even those supports provided by district staff. This is where we often engage our community resources, our behavioral and mental health supports, work alongside our partners. I did provide you all a little bit of a definition sheet of sorts on behalf of our community partners tonight, just because the services and supports are vast. And to Mr. Sandoval's point about students with needs and vulnerable communities, on behalf of the behavioral needs and the SEL team, I would tell you that there is no discrimination in terms of what our students are feeling, meaning you can be at our most southern school to our most northern school. The needs are great, and our students may present them differently, but we utilize our community partners and supports, these community services across all of our campuses. So I just want to highlight and make that known. But there's a few for our team out there, and I think these are ones that we would typically see. And again, I described that process that our schools use when they choose to engage or look to engage with other partners. We continue to work alongside them to find the best ones possible. But I appreciate your time tonight, and I'll stand along with Dr. Bell for any additional questions.
No, thank you, everybody, for your time on this subject. Very important subject, without question. I think, Ms. Myers, quick question for you. Dr. Bell brought up the need for technology or laptops, and Mr. Molino, I mean, what is our capacity to grow our inventory as it relates to laptops? I think we were talking about parents at the time, if I'm not mistaken. But
yeah, I think so. But we also talked about students being able to access learning materials from home.
yeah.
And I'll kick off just to respond from a funding perspective. In addition to being able to use our ESSER funds for computer purchases over the last couple of years, we've also received additional funding specifically for computers through the federal E-rate program, and it's an EFT. Correct me if I've got that wrong, Kevin, but it's a subset of the E-rate program with the federal government that's targeted specifically for laptops for student use to also be used at home. And Kevin, I think you have a count roughly of what that will mean for our students?
President Sandoval, through the E-rate program and the Emergency Connectivity Fund, we received funding for approximately a little over 19,000 laptops. Those have shipped and arrived, and we're preparing them. We're working with curriculum and Dr. Bell and her team and Ms. Woolsey to roll those out in August. We're going to start at the high school level and work our way down. We think we have enough to go down into probably 5th, 6th grade, and we just got approved last week for an additional 10,000 laptops. So once we're working with Ms. Myers to see if we can get those 10,000 ordered so they can be here for the summer, and then that'll put us at 29,000 new laptops. And then along with I think roughly 10 to 15,000 that Peoria bought at the beginning of the pandemic. We will be at one-to-one fully,
Nice.
even removing the laptops that are over 6 years old. We will have enough to be fully one-to-one.
Gotcha. That's great. That's great news.
It's important to mention, though, that this is many of the funds that we've used to bolster our the technology use in our school district is one-time dollars, and we're very aware of the issue that we have in that we have added how many thousand machines in our district over the last 2 years with ESSER and with.
With ESSER and ECF, I would say so far, roughly 32,000.
And all those machines will be coming to their end of life at the same time. So we have to get into a replacement mode where we can service those machines, where we can make sure that we can sustain a one-to-one model for years to come. And of course, that's capital funding. Those dollars come from bonds and things like that.
And Dr. Reynolds, if I may remind the board, our 2012 bond had a line item for technology purchases, and those bond dollars did allow us to make investments in computers and infrastructure district-wide over the years. But of course, now we don't have a new bond in place for planned replacement cycles in the future, and any activity would be dependent on capital funding at this point or a future bond.
You know, I had a quick question with regard to that. Actually, I have two questions. I presume that these would be the Chromebooks. Is that correct? And my other question is, are we giving them out to every single student or just the ones that actually do not have a computer or a laptop at home?
President Sandoval, Mrs. Hill, these will be Windows laptops, not Chromebooks. And we are working with curriculum on whether they will be assigned to each student so that they can take them home. Part of the regulations for the Emergency Connectivity Fund is that these have to be laptops that the students can take home to do distance learning or remote learning. That's one of the requirements.
I just wanted to say that I think it's amazing that we're able to get these resources, and obviously technology has been absolutely critical, especially, well, it's critical period, but it's been critical during the pandemic. But I guess as a teacher, and especially, you know, I guess I would just caution us around the one-to-one and to really think about it and look at the research and look what's happening in regard to especially our littlest ones, our pre-K through third grade, and are we effectively using that technology or as a tool or not? Because in my experience, in a lot of cases, it seems that technology has become a very, very large distraction in the classroom, constantly having to have kids shut the tab, close the tab. And, you know, this affects our curriculum and the decisions that we make, because if our curriculum is in fact online, then obviously we're going to need the laptops. But I just hope that as we move forward, we'll have some really critical conversations about how do we use technology, especially with our youngest learners, because I think we've lost a few things along the way. So I just wanted to say that.
And I would say, Mrs. Underhill, thank you for that comment. You're right, and that which is why we have not, as a district, adopted the one-to-one model, right? When we say one-to-one, and we probably should get away from using that term, because one-to-one means something different than what we equate, what we use one-to-one. When we say one-to-one, we mean every kid in the district is going to have access to the tool, right? Not necessarily that every child will have a computer that he or she takes home every single day. There are some expectations that we have to meet, but that's absolutely our approach, is that we want to ensure that we're using technology as the effective learning tool that it can be, but it is one significant tool, but it is only one tool. There are many others that we want our teachers and families and students to be using in that learning process.
I'm actually really glad you brought that up. That's a very good point, and I kind of echo that as well. We do have to be really careful about technology just in general. It's kind of sad we've gotten away from actual books, you know. There's something, they actually say that you learn and absorb better through actual books than you do online, with a computer, and I realize that's a tricky thing, but, and it is a huge distraction. And in our littles, of course, there's a huge disconnect, obviously they can't type, so there's a whole bunch of problems. So definitely, I think we have to be very, very discerning about how we use our technology, because I think we want to get our kids away from technology, but then we're giving them technology. It's a tricky thing, so, but I appreciate you bringing that up, because we do have to be very discerning. Thank you.
President Sandoval, if I may.
Sure.
Mrs. Underhill, that is a great point, and we've been having those discussions. Once we received the 19,000, we decided not to roll them out this spring until we had the conversations with curriculum and the plan of how they were going to be used in the classroom, integrated, supported, and how we were going to get teachers of professional development to do all that. So that's conversations that the IMT department and the curriculum department have been having with Dr. Bell's team, and putting that plan in place for next August.
That's awesome. And I would completely expect that of all you guys, but I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that clarifying comment. And I guess the way I took it was that, we had the capacity, right, but not the obligation, I guess, to ensure that every student had a laptop throughout the district. That said, I guess one question I do have, Dr. Davidson, is will we, as we review our strategic plan moving forward, and this is a lot of great information that we saw today, right? But will we see updates on how this is integrated into the strategic plan from an execution perspective, right? How all this comes together and what it looks like in our plan moving forward. Because Dr. Bell, you brought up, I think it was 18 days. There's no way we're going to be able to really recover or restore in an 18-day time period, restore what's been lost over the last 2 years, right? And I agree. I think this is something that summer for sure, but how do we even adapt the year? With our block schedules. At the high school level, advisory hours, I think, and I'm using probably different labels, and you're probably saying the same thing earlier, but, what that may look like, going into this subsequent academic year and subsequent academic years moving forward, right? And even, I don't disagree. I think we're social animals, and I think, being face-to-face and having books in front of us, that impacts many things, not only from a learning and retention perspective, but also from a overall, I guess, human skills perspective, right? But I've got to believe there are probably some students that actually excelled, in a virtual environment. So it'd be interesting to understand, where we may be adapting that knowledge to grow, our virtual capacity moving forward. So I guess my overall question is how all this kind of really morphs into our strategic plan, and how we as a board, continue to receive those updates and communication.
Yeah, we will, with our strategic reset, we plan, to periodically update the board on our progress. And that's our entire strategic reset is built around exactly what we're talking about today.
Board members, any further questions? Ms. Hill? Dr. Sorensen? Good. Ms. Underhill? Good. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Bell. Mr. Molino, thank you. Ms. Myers? All right, moving on to 3.2, budget update.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, President Sandoval, members of the Governing Board, and Dr. Reynolds and Cabinet. Tonight's update is essentially a continuation of the presentation that I gave on January 27th, where in real time as we're receiving information and we're working on our budget process for next year with our budget team and administrative team, but as well as navigating some unknowns that could potentially also impact this year. And so moving to the next slide, I have a very brief continuing update for tonight, which will include an update on the K-12 aggregate expenditure limit, as well as comments on the current year budget, fiscal year 2022, continuing information regarding fiscal year 2023 compensation, as well as budget development, and then highlight a couple of possible next steps. And then, of course, there'll be time for questions at the end of the presentation. And so with that, on this slide, I'll just touch again on the K-12 aggregate expenditure limit. Just as a reminder, it is a 40-year formula. It was set 40 years ago, and it's really a spending cap for K-12 public schools here in Arizona. It does not apply to charter schools, just public school districts. And there has been a concern this year that we've exceeded the expenditure limit by over $1.1 billion statewide. And so I've shared previously that if action's not taken by March 1st, that districts would be required to reduce this year's budget to actually implement budget cuts in the fourth quarter of the fiscal year. And on average, it's about 16% of a district's budget on average statewide. And so I can report from an action perspective, on Tuesday, the House did vote to override the fiscal year 2022 aggregate expenditure limit, and it was a vote of 44 to 15 with one absent, and so the two-third vote has been reached in the House. Now it's still with the Senate at this point in time. A vote to this moment has not taken place. As I understand it, that the Senate does need 20 votes to have that two-third majority. So we're anxiously watching. At this point, we're looking to next week. We don't expect action at this point this week. So that's important because we still have an unknown related to the current year. But even with possible action before March 1st, the discussion is about the current year. This is a multi-year concern and will require next steps by the legislature or possibly Arizona voters to establish a permanent solution, a fix, if you will. Again, this limit is not new money. It's not a new tax. It's simply allowing school districts to expend the budgets that they legally adopted with appropriated funds from the state of Arizona. So I know there's some questions out there what that means, but that's simply the explanation. And again, if action is not taken by March 1st, we will be required here in Peoria Unified to reduce our fiscal year 2022 budget by $43.1 million. So that's my update. We're still looking at 2 fiscal years, our current fiscal year and next fiscal year, anxiously watching the legislature to see what action will be taking place by March 1st. So that's my update on the aggregate expenditure limit. And then if we move to the next slide, our budget team has continued to meet. In fact, we just had a meeting last night, and there was a lot of honest conversation from team members because we've been meeting since October, and we have been on track, and I've provided an update in January at the January 27th meeting that it has been our intention to be able to come forward before contracts are issued to recommend a minimum compensation increase, not just for base compensation, but also from classroom site fund. And the input from teachers, membership across the budget team, including association members, was we don't feel comfortable by February 24th to have a minimum recommendation with so many unknowns. It was deemed not to be prudent to say, here's our recommendation for a raise right now. So because of that, and knowing that we bring recommendations forward 2 times, once with the actual presentation and then at a subsequent board meeting there's action, we are no longer on track prior to March 10th, the March 10th board meeting, where the next day we will be issuing contracts to staff. We don't want to deviate from our contract timeline because we have to have continuity of operations. But the team does not feel comfortable making a recommendation for a compensation increase with these unknowns. It's very fluid. So that is a continuing update from administration and the budget team on the work that we have been doing. Now, this is also a concern because as we're setting the budget for next year, it's not just compensation increases and ensuring that we have qualified staff being hired or returning to work, but also there's that multi-year issue. And if, for example, this aggregate expenditure limit is referred to the voters, and there's an election in November 2022 to address it, districts won't know if it has been permanently fixed or not until November. And you're almost halfway through a fiscal year at that point. So as we're working on our budget development, we're also identifying contingency areas where if there's an outcome that does not address the expenditure limit next year, that we would have opportunities as we continue to work over the next 4 months and propose our budget in June to have opportunities to plan for if there would be a possible reduction. And so districts across the state have talked about things like, well, you know, reserves or possibly looking at activities at schools, hiring freezes through attrition. You know, those are simple things you can do. And then, of course, the more impactful outcomes are you have staffing reductions as well as furlough days and compensation impacts. We're not there now. We know that there are obviously things that we have to consider and have on our radar. But what we do know is we don't feel comfortable at this point making the increase recommendation prior to contracts going out. Now, we will be bringing forward our insurance renewal on the 24th. We also will be most likely on the March 10th board meeting, at the March 10th board meeting, making a recommendation for a retention stipend that would be paid out of primarily ESSER dollars. So that's, again, those one-time dollars. But at this point, it's such a fluid scenario. The team had very in-depth conversation. People are concerned. You know, people are concerned if they're going to get a paycheck, if this isn't addressed. And for Peoria Unified, we're in a fairly good position. Some districts have talked about they would have to close their doors on April 1st. So those are those conversations for this year. I'll keep you posted, and I'll have another more comprehensive update again on the 24th. And with that, I stand for questions or comments from the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. Ms. Hill?
I guess I could probably speak for all of us that it's quite concerning, you know, and it's stressful not knowing what the future is going to hold. Yeah, and I completely agree. I think we have to be very, very careful about how we proceed with, you know, stipends or raises or extra monies in any fashion until we know what we're dealing with, because otherwise we might have to backstep, right? You know, we could give something out and then have to almost take it away, and that's worse in a way. You know, if people are expecting to get X amount of dollars and then we have to take it back after a month or two, is worse than, I think, not getting it at all until we know what we're dealing with. So, like I said, it's a very fluid situation, and hopefully everything will get, you know, figured out. And I don't know what we're going to do until we get to November. If it does go to the general public, then we are going to have to be maybe very frugal until we know what we're dealing with, so that we're not left high and dry without enough money to get through the year. So thank you for everything.
Thank you, Mrs. Hill. Your comments are very similar to some of the comments that the budget team members shared. There was a concern to make a recommendation and then be in a situation in a couple of months where you have to possibly adjust that recommendation. Also, we still have the months of March, April, May, and June where there's the potential that the legislative session can go that long. Last year, the legislative session went until the end of June, so a lot can happen in 4 months. We're monitoring bills and activity in real time, but of course our primary focus right now is the AEL. And again, thank you for your comments. They're very similar to what the budget team discussed last night.
Dr. Sorensen?
Yeah, I know last year at this time, I really pressed to allow teachers to have an idea of compensation when their contracts came out. I know you guys did a lot of work and you met earlier than you normally did, so I just appreciate moving up that timeline and obviously support the decision to wait. You can't make fiscal decisions before you know what your standpoint is, and I'm just grateful to all the legislators who voted to waive that, and we need a long-term solution. We can't do this every year, and you can't say you're going to pay someone X amount and then for no reason say you're going to pay them 18% less or whatever it is. That's just, we can't operate like that. And so that statement is more for our legislators, and I hope the Senate passes it and we find a long-term solution, because we cannot hang our communities in the balance of a bill or a law or whatever that was in 1980, right? That's just not realistic. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sorensen. Ms. Underhill?
I would just say I echo what you just said completely, very much, and am very thankful and grateful to those in our legislature that did agree to go ahead and extend the limit, and I appreciate everyone that's putting our kids first, so thank you. And thank you, all of you, for dealing with all this change in a very, once again, changeable, crazy year, so thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Underhill. And Ms. Myers, as always, thank you. You know, I said it earlier, public education really finance in public education, and in a, I guess, where it is not funded equal to the value that it adds to our young scholars and certainly the future of our society and community. And it makes it even tougher now, you know, as we've gone through these last couple of years, and now we're trying to restore and recover those very individuals. And, you know, we can't plan to execute on some of the things that we just talked about, and in that strategic plan to do so, you know, because of individuals who, you know, for whatever reason, you know, don't prioritize, you know, the impact, really, that, you know, our public schools or public education has, again, on our youth and the future. And now, you know, you brought up the health benefits, that we're going to have a discussion around that, or that overall compensation model. And, you know, I know my wife, as everyone knows, she's in the Phoenix Union. I know she's communicated to me at home, you know, how much, you know, their health insurance is going up, you know, as a result of what we've been through, you know, with the pandemic. And, you know, you add that in, and the potential of, you know, losing 16% roughly, you know, of our overall operating budget. It just doesn't make sense. And, you know, I guess to Dr. Sorensen's point, you know, my hopes are that, you know, the leadership at our state level will, you know, again, you know, really lead with others in mind, and prioritize people in the situation, and really understand the benefit of public education, of being a forward-thinking, innovative organization. And there's no doubt, to be able to do so, you need resources, and one of those resources is certainly funding, that we've, you know, continue to be behind on in our state. So, but thank you again for the report out. Really appreciate it. I know everybody's working hard and trying to figure out, you know, what we may have to do to adapt, and I know it's not easy, so I do appreciate the just the countless hours that you put in, you know, on a weekly basis, to, again, support our kids and support one another. So thank you for that. All right, if no further questions, comments for Ms. Myers, we shall move on.
And I apologize, team. I have a hard stop that I have to leave, so I apologize. Thank you.
No worries. Going on to 3.3, National School Boards Association and Arizona School Boards Association memberships. Is that Dr. Reynolds?
Thank you, President Sandoval.
Thank you.
So tonight, it was a request of one of our governing board members that we bring some information to the board regarding both the Arizona School Boards Association and the National Association regarding costs and benefits that we receive. So we have provided those for the governing board. You can look through those. I'm sure you have. I just want to draw your attention specifically to the costs that you want to, whoever's running that, scroll down. The annual membership for ASBA is approximately $10,000. We also pay an additional approximately $5,200 for our policy services that we receive. And then, of course, we pay for the board docs service, and that's obviously the software that we use to communicate both with our community and internally around our board meetings and the information that comes with that. So that is the financial expectation for being part of ASBA. I would say that the policy services that we receive, and that means the alerts that come to us the way that ASBA walks through new laws and new expectations, new policies, all of those types of things, and then converts them into board policy that we bring to you as recommended changes. To do that on our own would cost significantly more. And so that is an important part of that. I would just, again, towards the end of that document, you'll see the National School Boards Association and the benefits that we receive from an annual, or districts receive as their annual membership. The cost for a district our size is approximately $8,600 per year. But it is important to note that we have not renewed our membership for this fiscal year for NSBA.
Questions, comments? Ms. Hill?
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to figure out, so just so that I completely understand, do they actually own all of our policies? I mean, do they actually own, do you know what I mean? So if we were to leave or not renew with them and with someone else, or would they actually keep all the policies? Do they actually own it?
Yeah, so there's some question around exactly what that means. If you remember, when you look at our policies, you can go policy to policy, and where the policy title is, you'll see the little copyright symbol, so the little C with the circle. If that is there, that's their copyright. When we have policies that we have changed and adapted to make our own, or we never adopted the ASBA policy to begin with, meaning, somebody's going to have to help me. I don't know approximately what year Peoria moved from managing their own policy. Of course, the veteran.
I know it was 2008 because I did it.
Thank you for that. So in 2008, we converted over to the ASBA policies. Governing boards, for the most part, manage their own policies for many, many, many years. And it was a significant cost of both people power, of dollars to be able to support that. And so ASBA adopted those policies. Many districts moved over to the ASBA policy. It's essentially outsourcing that work because it's obviously less expensive to do it in a cooperative way for many school districts than for each school district to pay an employee to monitor it, but then also pay the attorney costs associated with going through all of that. And so it's a significant savings in that. What ASBA owns as their own policy, what is ours, that's a difficult question to answer, but certainly it is their policies when it is copyrighted. And so we would lose access to those policies.
Okay, I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. So is there any other agency that could take it over if we wanted to? Are they the only show in town type of a thing? So if we ever decided that we wanted to get out, like the the national chapter, obviously, called parents domestic terrorists. And so that was a big misstep, and I know that some school districts have pulled, and I support that. I think that was very inappropriate that they would do that. So I'm not a big fan of NSBA or ASBA. So I'm trying to figure out, do we have any other options, because we want to be supportive of parents and their voice. And I don't feel like, I think the only reason that NSBA backed up from what they said is because they got so much backlash. I do believe that they think that possibly parents are domestic terrorists, or they wouldn't have said it.
Yeah, so it's important to note that ASBA and NSBA are two separate organizations. Now, recently, as recent as 2:30, ASBA has separated from NSBA from being a member of the association. We also have not renewed our NSBA membership. So when we're talking about what we're dealing with right now is specifically at the ASBA membership. your question is there another group? Right now, not at this level. Now, there are some groups that have started to form or thought about starting to form, but they're in the infancy of that and not nearly at the level that we would do. So I can't say there are no other organizations that we could use, but this currently, ASBA is the accepted policy group.
So then, obviously, I do know that there's a separation between ASBA and NSBA. What would be the ability for us to pull from NSBA?
We have not renewed our
Right.
membership to NSBA.
Right. So we are not planning on renewing it? Is that what the deal is then?
Not in the near future.
Okay. I guess I didn't know that clarification. I thought we were waiting type of a thing, so I didn't know. Well, okay. So that makes me feel better because of the obvious misstep that they took.
Well, and I would go a little bit further, and as we review, right, anytime we invest our taxpayers' resources, it's important that we ensure that that investment is paying off some dividends for us, right? That there is some value that comes back to us. Our membership in NSBA, set aside some of the political things that has happened over the last, whatever it is, 6 months or 8 months, whatever it is now, we don't necessarily get the bang for our buck. And that really is the driving factor. So for us to renew that membership, we'd need to see some significant additional value that is provided to us. With the ASBA, that is there's a tremendous value in managing our governing board policy. It would be significantly more than our membership for ASBA to manage our policies.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate the clarification because I thought you meant when you said we haven't renewed, like we're waiting, to make that determination type of a thing. So
And
we
it doesn't
have
mean that we
decided-
wouldn't be a member in the future.
Right.
But currently,
right.
we are not renewing our membership.
Okay, well, that's good for the public to know too, because that was a bone of contention with some people and as it should be, so I completely understand that. So, and I appreciate the information about ASBA as far as, the documents and so forth and who would support us. And obviously, we're looking at financial stress. So it's good to understand that this is, even if we wanted to pull out of ASBA, there's financially, we can't do it. We just can't do it right now.
I would
Even
not
if we
recommend
wanted
that.
to,
That's
we
right.
just can't do it. So it's good to understand that and understand that we are no longer affiliated with NSBA. So the public then has that knowledge as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Ms. Underhill?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that I do think when, $25,000 for what they're doing for us is very reasonable, considering it would probably take at least a full-time staff person to do something like that, I would imagine. So I do think that is a very valuable use of our resources. And now I also feel like as a new board member when I came on and throughout my terms, that ASBA has been really helpful to me to learn and understand school finance and school law and just all different things and learning about how, things are done differently in other districts and in our state. And I feel like it is a really valuable organization for board members as well, in addition to the, obviously the services that they provide to districts, which are enormous. So, and keeping up with all these legislative changes, et cetera. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that I do think that it is a valuable relationship, and I hope that we will continue that with ASBA. Thank you.
And Mrs. Underhill, just to go back to that 25,000, it really is the $16,000 because Board Docs is the software. We would have to have the software anyway, regardless of whether or not we had an association. And in fact, it's my understanding we get a reduced cost with Board Docs because of our relationship with ASBA. So it really is that 16 or 15.6 is the cost. We would have to invest in a software program. We probably would continue with Board Docs.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, good. Even better then. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Underhill. Yeah, I would agree with the benefit that, look, ASBA has been around for 70-plus years, And, you know, while there may be some organizations that we may consider in the future, you know, some are fairly new or fledgling. And so the acumen of ASBA and how it's adapted to, you know, education here in our state is invaluable. You know, and I've always said professional organizations like an ASBA, you know, provide a lot of value to board members. You know, as we continue to look to grow and be better, you know, at our jobs, you know, those professional organizations add a ton of value, again, from a education perspective. Yeah, and that 15,000, I mean, if we had to retain an attorney to help us with our policies, that'd be a monthly fee, you know, versus an annual, well, yeah, might be, but it'll be pretty close. So too much, maybe. So we get them for a whole year. But no, I guess my question to you, Dr. Reynolds and team, is, you know, you're right. I mean, you know, we expect a return on our investment, and you know, and people, organizations get paid for the value that they add. You know, as ASBA, you know, in my mind, really exceeds the value of the 15,000 that we're paying them on an annual basis. But you know, definitely want to hear from you on that as well.
No, for sure. I mean, that's just in our policies alone.
Yeah.
We have a return on our investment in that area. So yeah, for sure. And all the other resources that they provide, whether it's new governing board training or, you know, financial training, all of those types of things, there's a lot of value in that relationship. And as I shared, Ms. Hill asked, the reason why I say that, you know, for the time being, down the road, a new board, new superintendent, different climate, different reactions to certain things. This community may choose to be a member of NSBA or another governing board. I don't know what other associations are out there for governing boards, but as of now, we're stepping away from that.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Any other further questions, comments? Good. Dr. Reynolds, thank you, sir. All right, moving on to 3.4, Superintendent Goals Update. Dr. Reynolds.
Thank you, President Sandoval. We'll pull up. So the purpose of this agenda item this evening is just to update the governing board on where we are with my performance goals for this school year. If you, as you move through the screens, you can see that obviously my goals are designed around our strategic plan, our strategic reset. And what I wanted to start off with is just a reminder, quick reminder of what those goals are. So in the first goal, and you, if you remember, you approved these goals back in October. And we have been, as a district, working towards them. Yep, one more. There you go. Thank you, Dr. Davidson. So goal number 1, increase student performance in each of the assessment categories. We're not going to go through all of them today, but just as a reminder, those are the goal areas. You heard some of the things that we're doing to try to reach these goals. What I would share is Mr. Moss is going to address more specifically some of the areas that we're in. Some we have some data on right now, some we have to wait until the end of the school year, but it is very tough out there in our classrooms right now. When we set these goals, we were really expecting to be in that recovery mode, and we are yet to hit that mode. We are still managing the pandemic. But goal number 2, we talked about our district climate surveys. That survey, again, Mr. Moss will address that a little bit later, but that survey has been released, and we will anxiously be awaiting our results there. And the last 2 goals were to increase our student enrollment by at least 2% this year, but also develop and implement our strategic plan reset, and we'll address those as we get there. So what I'm going to do is first turn it over for a quick update to Mr. Moss, who is our guru of all things data and research. and he has done a great deal of work, as you heard earlier, working with our principals, working with our teachers in clusters to make sure that each of our sites have their data and are able to take that back and work within their professional learning communities to continue to grow and improve.
Thank you, Dr. Reynolds and members of the governing board. I want to tie a quick conversation here that, you asked about the data that we use, and this is the first time, and again, I've been around a long time, that there is a direct connection between what we're presenting to teachers as what is driving their instruction and what is on Dr. Reynolds' goals. Today, for example, I had a conversation with our instructional coaches on this iReady data, and I could show them how their school scored, how each student scored, how we were able to compare what happened from their first time they took the test to the second time they took the test, not just on an overall score, but also by individual areas of domains, if you will, that we had high frequency words and phonics, and I could show them specifically how they did on each of those places from one place to the other, and that's where we get into that tier 2 information or tier 1 information in terms of what's there. So I'll move forward real quickly now as we get through, and I'll have a couple comments. But the first one you see there is the iReady diagnostic. iReady is a nationally normed diagnostic reading and math test. And so it is given across the nation to thousands of students, and from that then they're able to create a standardized measure called either a lexile or a quantile. And a lexile is a reading level and a quantile is a math level. And so based upon what your student score is, and again, the test adjusts to the student's ability level, they're able to say that this student is where on some scale. For example, I'm a third grader, I score the right number, I get to be, for example, now we're using the term mid or above grade level. It also tells us if they're early on grade level, if they're 1 grade level below, 2 grade levels below, 3 grade levels below, and again, gives us specifics as to why it's there. The information that you see, the 48% and the 31%, is based upon the current number of students who have reached proficiency, what they basically believe is proficiency on their grade level. Okay, so halfway through the year, a student who is now either early on grade level or mid or above grade level, that's the percentage of students that are at that place. We have done some comparisons back to what happened, for example, in 2020 and 21, what happened in 19 and 18, to kind of see how those 48% and the 31% compare to where we were halfway through the year before, and we're pretty close to being where we were before. We're not, I would tell you we're probably farther behind in math than we are in reading, but these numbers of 55 and 75 are certainly not out of reach, and this is the information we've delivered to the teachers that they can, and the principals, that they can move forward to get those goals met. So that's the number of students essentially who are on grade level or mid or on grade level after the second diagnostic test. Okay. The other piece of information that the diagnostic test gives us, as when the student takes the test for the first time, it establishes for us what, based upon historical data across the whole group, that this student should grow, let's say 21 points on their lexile score or 21 on their scale score. They set them, and they set that student then a goal that says my goal is 21% to be what I would consider to be typical growth. In other words, a student grew 1 exact year. They also set for us what we consider to be a number called stretch growth. And stretch growth is essentially what it would take for that student to increase his level and get ahead of the game over a 3-year period. So I can't just grow at 21, I have to grow maybe at 36 to move from 1 grade level below to mid or above in 3 years. I need to score a 36. So it gives us both of those numbers. But what it really does is it establishes then a target for the teacher to be able to move forward and track how this student is moving up those scales to be the right place. Those numbers that you see, the 35.9 and the 42.1, are essentially the percentage of students who have reached their stretch growth or their expected growth already this year. So those students have already met the growth that they were expecting to get to, and that's their projection. Again, you see the numbers that are to the left there. Again, we've done some comparisons, and we're not far off in terms of being able to get our kids to reach those places. So we're moving in that direction. We have work to do, was again, the same conversation we've had with teachers that they can increase and move forward. But we've done some comparisons and we're not far off of where we have been in the past. The next step down is the 3 through 8, which is ELL, AASA, AZM2 proficiency rates. We have, for example, and you see the test there, data that we're using is called Transcend. Transcend is a product that was developed by Pearson, because Pearson is the new writer of AASA. And so we're using essentially their benchmark tests. And what we do is we give a benchmark test that is aligned to Peoria scope and sequence. In other words, it matches with our units and what is taught in our schools at that particular time. The tests are cumulative and they move forward. So in other words, the first test we gave was in October and it covered what was covered from August to October. The next test we gave was December and it covered what was taught between August and December. So it's always cumulative and always cycles and always puts in things that the student has to know. And again, they are giving us direction by the questions that they ask as to what they think is the most important in terms of blueprints and test prep materials. So they ask those questions more often in these Transcend benchmarks. And so these numbers that you see there are essentially the number of students who have reached proficiency or would they expect to reach proficiency if they continue to grow at the same pace, and that they are keeping up essentially with the scope and sequence of our schools as they move forward. We're going to give this test again, you notice, in March, and that will give us a much better picture, we think, of what's going to happen. Now you have a August to March step that kind of tells you where we are moving forward with trying to get ourselves ready to take that test in April and get the best we possibly can for those students. The next goal, you notice, does not have anything in there. AASA growth is a comparative statistic based upon how we do relative to other school districts. So our students are compared not against the standard, but against how their peers perform. So each student then is put into a peer group, and their peer group moves X amount. They do that comparison, and they tell us what is the amount that our students are growing compared to the others. That won't be available to us probably till, I would say, late June, 1st of July is about the first time we'll get that information that gives us that information, that goal. If you think that those numbers at 53 and 55, think of the whole population. We're looking at the median score. So we're looking at the middle score. So we're not looking at the real high end. We're not looking at the low end. We're looking at the median score of 53 and 55, which means the middle of our population is going to be growing faster than the middle of the rest of the state. And so it kind of gives us a relative comparison in terms of how we move in that process. Those numbers are, again, not available till July. If we go
I have a quick question for you,
Sure.
if that's okay, before you move on. Just to clarify, too, you said relative to other school districts within Arizona or
Yes.
within, okay. Or
within the whole state of Arizona.
just Arizona, not
Just Arizona,
United
correct.
States. Okay. So I was wondering that, and it's kind of a strange question, but, when we're trying to see the proficiency aspects, when you say we want they're proficient in a certain grade level, what exactly is your definition of that? Is that someone a child that just gets a D, they get enough, or are we talking an A, a C? I mean, what do you mean by proficient?
They've established the cut scores, and
Okay.
they've established those as highly proficient or proficient based upon the state. And so it's a number that they've set for us, and it's a percentage of students. And again, it's the bell curve, and so it's that piece that's above the halfway part there. They're going to reset cut scores again because it's the first time they've given this test, and so we're kind of shooting in the dark a little bit about what it's going to be. But it's a process that has to do with the norms in terms of those that they think have, I don't want to say the word, I'm going to use the word mastered, right? Fifth grade level, but is it mastered 100% of fifth grade, or is it mastered 70% of fifth grade, sixth grade, whatever it is? that answer is always fuzzy when you ask the state. They kind of say, well, this is where we think the kids are proficient to move on and be successful.
Okay, thank you. I just was trying to figure out, because proficient to me might be a different definition, you know, because I'm thinking proficient, I'm thinking, you're pretty good at it, like, you know, at least a B level, you know, is what I'm thinking, not even necessarily an A. So, but their version of proficient might be just enough to get by, like a high D.
And
I
would
don't
tell you,
know.
what I would tell you is, I wouldn't say it's a high D. What I would tell you is, I think that what they try to concern themselves with is, what would make you be able to continue to be successful as you move forward, right? So if I was in 5th grade, what is it that I have to learn in 5th grade that would make me be reasonably successful or successful in 6th grade? So I can't be down here because I can't pass the 6th grade. So where is it that I reach that point that they say this is what we think is good enough to make you be successful in 6th grade, right? And so it's vague at
Okay,
best.
it sounds like at best it's maybe like a C average then at least.
I would say.
Okay, all right.
Maybe a little bit high C. I would place
Okay,
high
that's
C
good.
closer to
Okay.
B.
Okay, thank you. I was just trying to get an idea, because if their idea of proficiency is enough to eke by with like a D, that's to me not proficient
Well, I think
enough.
Mrs. Hill, it's important to note that the correlation between, and I understand how you're trying to visualize that, but there's not a correlation between grades and a student's performance. We have not done the correlation there.
No.
Great. So thank you very much for presenting the data and diving into it as you always do, which is great. And obviously it looks like our math is a little bit more of a challenge at this point in time. So I am curious about, and this kind of goes back to what I was talking about before with the teachers. So you were saying that they can look at down to the very different aspects of the skill that teachers need to work on with individual students, correct? Mm-hmm. And so are we targeting our PD in that direction? Because I guess my biggest challenge is that, you know, teachers have to plan for tier 1, and now with the many, many needs, they're also having to have separate plans for tier 2, and those tier 2 plans could be different for every kid that needs those services in the classroom, which could be 10, could be 12, could be 15. So I guess I'm just curious about, that's where I'm saying, and I'm not one of those amazing teachers that we have out there. We have a lot of really amazing teachers, but I guess what I'm saying is that piece, that drill down is amazing, but are we helping our teachers to find a way to manageably address all these various needs and then progress monitor reporting on that data on all those various needs? I guess I can just say that it's pretty monumental. So how are we addressing that?
I would say yes, we're doing the best we can with each of those, right? And again, we all walk that fine line between push and pat on the back and push and pat on the back. We walk that every day. But what we're really trying to do, and I guess the other piece of iReady that we didn't mention, is it also has some built-in student level lessons that move them individually. So the student can work, for example, we talk about technology, can work on a computer for a period of time that will move them up that scale individually and will address their specific needs, because the computer is adaptive to how they answer the questions. So my questions may be different than Dr. Bell's questions in each person as it goes along. It also has a mechanism that if you don't do well on the first 2 times you do it, it locks you out, and it does some notification of the teacher that says, hey, Mike's tried lesson 22 twice and didn't get lesson 22, and now the teacher knows that there's some opportunity for them to go do some individualized. I have the 6 of us that do this as we move through. We're working with our PD people and how they do that, and also our pull-out groups, right? Our PAL teachers and our reading teachers and our math instructors who are coming in and talking about how do you use that data to use them and move them forward. And again, we are still in some cases in the infancy stage, and in some cases we have teachers who do it very well, but it is certainly a conversation we have daily as to how we're going to get these kids to be successful, individual kids to be successful in the process and move forward.
No, thank you. And I mean, there is no like easy answer, but just wanted to put that up.
Ms. Underhill, if I could also, some of our schools, and I think to Mr. Moss's point, there's a continuum of where our schools are, but to really refocus on the PLCs that Dr. Reynolds and Dr. Sorensen talked about, our schools do have times that they bring their staff members together, look at this data, sort students out, make goals appropriate to the data that they're looking at, and then they take that back. And I know many schools are modifying their overall daily schedule to find times built in for students to get into small groups outside of their homerooms and get that specialized instruction, that response to intervention. So it is monumental, without a doubt, and I applaud our staff for doing it, but they have the information at their fingertips, and you're starting to see them use it to drive that instruction. So it's really fun to watch. And we have some schools out there, if you're ever interested in visiting, we have some principals that'll show you not just what they're doing, but how they're getting the outcomes that we want to see. So,
No, I appreciate that very much. I just want parents and our community to understand, that there's sort of this like meta work now, right, that teachers are having to do. It's not just plan a lesson for, your class for those 5 subjects that you teach every single day, but now it's plan a lesson at, and we've always differentiated, but now we're like literally like differentiating down to the skill. So it's plan a lesson and then plan 15 other little lessons, well, although technology is helping us. And so I just want, and then report on that data and then follow that data. And then, so there's a lot of meta work that teachers have to do. And I appreciate that you appreciate that. I know you do, but I just want the families and the communities and everybody to understand, kind of what goes into making that happen. So thank you.
Hey, Mr. Moss, before you continue, Ms. Ari, to Ms. Underhill's point, and obviously not at the granular level, but everything that we talked about today, as far as restoring, recovery, et cetera, right? Can you talk a little bit about that communications plan to the community on what we're doing as a district, to uplift our kids and really, uplift our students, out of this last couple years?
President Sandoval, thank you for that question. A lot of what we do with my team and with our communication plan is to invest a lot of time and energy supporting our principals so they can best tell their story to their community. As you heard, there is some autonomy in some parts of what we do. With so much differentiation, it's making sure that our schools have the tools that they need to best share that story. Of course, we share that on a district level as well, but we know that our principals are really key communicators with their individual communities, so it's working closely alongside them to help support them with that message. You heard the toolkits that was shared by Dr. Bell. We utilize those for a number of different initiatives within our district to kind of take information and whittle it down and customize it for communities, and then make sure our principals can share it as needed.
Yeah, no, I think, that's right? I mean, they have those connections with those families and those communities that are immediately around their sites. But even from a global or overarching message from a district standpoint, and Dr. Reynolds, I'm going to apologize in advance. I didn't watch the latest video that came out, but I mean, like in videos like that, right? More of an overarching message versus getting at the granular level where the sites will do that, right? So just including, some conversations around what we're doing from you. Thank you.
Mr. Sandoval, what I would add also that one of the conversations we had with principals and with the people who run the school, the executive directors, was that we want to present this information as soon as we could as of last week, because we're having parent-teacher conferences in the next day or two. And now, instead of a teacher just being able to say, Johnny is struggling, we now have the opportunity to say, Johnny is struggling and here's what he's struggling with, and with specific pieces in terms of what's there. We talked about identification of summer school students, and we're able to take and combine the Transcend test with some of the iReady tests and say not only is Johnny struggling on 5th grade, but he's also having trouble with his math that he should have gotten 2 years ago, and this is what we're doing to work on that, and we'd like him to come back to summer school for these 18 days to work on those specific things. So it's information that we relate to that process also. Okay, we'll move to the high schools, and the high schools are a little bit, you see a little bit less information there. Probably, and I'm going to tell you, we're kind of, we have given the ACT test for the last 12 years based upon a Helios grant. It is now moved to be the state test, and unfortunately, in high school, we have changed state tests. We had a change in the test, no test, and a new test, and now we're getting a new test again. So there's no consistency of information in terms of what's there. We've taken some steps. An example, we've created some practice tests. I know that some of the schools have begun to take with students. An example, they've given them the test and worked through the problems, and then they turn around and give them the test 2 weeks later, but they time them because now ACT has a timer in it, and so they're teaching on some of those kind of things. So each of those are based upon what we've done with Helios. I don't know. We're kind of shooting in the dark a little bit right now, and we're trying to gather information about students over time so that we can begin to get some sort of predictability of what is really important. Is it really important that they pass their course assessment in Algebra 1? Is it really important that they get an A in biology? What are those things that really make a difference when this kid comes to take the test as a junior? And so we're starting to gather that information. We'll probably have it. It may take us another year or so to get most of it, but we do have some plans to gather some of that information as it moves forward.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I didn't mean to make that much noise. I was just going to ask you, I was curious because I do understand that the high school students do take the ACT. Is it the actual ACT that takes 4 hours and they have to put all that stuff, right?
Okay.
So do we not, or do they get an actual like number up to 1,600? Do they, or
Yes.
whatever, I'm sorry, that's the
36,
SAT. I'm
yes.
sorry. So they do get that. They actually get the full test and they can use it for college as well, so they
Yes,
can just
and
utilize that?
Yes, and all the ACT processes are also included. So in other words, they can identify their 4 schools that they want to send them to. They can identify that, and that automatically gets sent to colleges automatically. So when you sign up normally for an ACT test, you take the test and you say, I want my scores delivered to
Right.
ASU, U of A, whatever it is. That also is part of the process. So they do that as part of their first thing they do in the morning is fill out those things. The students fill out all their information and they get exactly the same experience. And in fact, more, because the normal ACT does not include writing, and we actually have a writing prompt that now has been added to the ACT test for the state testing.
Okay, and then I know they normally charge for that, so did we get, how does that work for us? Is that a grant, or is that something that's been provided for free,
That's
or?
state funded.
State
We do
funded,
not
okay.
pay.
Okay.
That is part of the state process of, it's the state-approved national testing, just like AZM2, just like ASA, so it's free to all of our students.
Awesome, okay. Thank you very much. And I guess, too, it's interesting, so there, for the various areas, we're not even up to 40% on any of it for the 9 through 12, huh?
We would like it to be much higher. Again,
Okay.
those are based upon past performances, and again, those were things that we did not, one of the big things about testing is that when it becomes the standard, that's where you modify your test. And then using another example, we're working on modifying our course assessments to have the exact same types of questions and exact same format of what the ACT looks like, so that kids get used to seeing the exact same stuff all the time. We've never done that with this test. In addition, it is a college readiness test, and so is every student going to be academically ready to be able to do this? That's kind of where we're pushing. So we'd like those to be higher, and I'm sure they will be higher in the future. Knock on wood.
You know, too, out of curiosity, I mean, generally, if you take the test numerous times, they're all on your record. So are they all
Correct.
on their record? So if they bomb it, we'll say, in their 9th grade year, but they do great in their 12th grade year, but it's all on their record? Is
They
that pretty
only
much?
take the test as a junior. They take the test one
Okay.
time, and that's all.
Oh.
But if a student takes this test and then wants to take it again, it's treated just like an additional ACT, so they can substitute scores. You have students, for example, that
Or
take
the
the test
hybrid, they can
multiple
take the
times.
best
Hybrid,
from-
and it
okay.
still falls just as it would be a regular ACT
Okay.
opportunity.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out to, kind of almost protect them a little bit with college, because if they can see it all, you know what I'm saying? So, okay, thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
Good. The last one there, the College and Career Readiness Index, I'm not sure how familiar you are with that. That is a list of about 25 things that students do in their 4-year careers. An example, Some of them are academic, some of them are CTE related, some of them are achievement related. An example, students get benefit from things like taking the 16 required classes to be eligible for state universities. They get benefit for scoring well on the ACT. They get benefit for taking AP classes. They get benefit for taking dual enrollment. They get benefit for CTE, being a CTE completer in any one of their strands. They get benefit for earning certificates in CTE. They get benefit for creating a work-based, whatever those things called, where they work for a company. Internship, thank you. They get an internship, they get those. And each one, then the school gets points, and then you get the average, and that's what that number is. The average of number of your seniors, how many of your seniors scored, and it's only judged on seniors, but it is something that we're well aware of as freshmen, that we talk with students about as freshmen and say, hey, you need to take these classes because you'll be a strand completer in business or in welding or in whatever. And so we guide them as a part of the guidance process to move them forward to do that. It pushes them into AP, it pushes them into doing well on their ACT test because, again, that number helps the school, and that's how we get the benefit in terms of what's there. And again, that's calculated after graduation. We have a whole spreadsheet that figures out what each kid did, and we move forward with that and turn it into the state.
Is it, now the number 20, is that out of 100? Like 20?
It's 20 out of 20.
Oh, 20 out of 20. Okay, think of like
Actually,
20 out of-
22 is the highest you can
Okay.
get. But we have been very successful in that throughout the years, and it's 20% of your, it's also part of your A through F label, and it's 20% of your A through F label, and so 22 is the maximum. We're in the 19 to 20 range in most of our schools.
I was just curious on that. That's a statewide thing?
Yes.
Okay, that's great.
Okay. We'll move forward. We just talked quickly about the surveys. We issued the surveys on Wednesday, right? We issued surveys. We issue surveys to parents, to students, and to staff. We already have a significant number of people who have taken it. We're probably in the 800 range in staff. We're about 1,300 or so in parents. Students is only grades 5 through 8. This year, for the first time, again, we did send a copy of the survey to parents so they could see what kind of questions they asked specifically of the students so that they could opt out if they wished. Some of the things that are on the list that Dr. Carter brought up was we asked specific questions like, I feel safe at school. My school is safe and welcoming. Those 6 things that they talk about in the SEL process, we specifically ask questions about. I know I have a caring adult, right? That we get some sort of feedback even back through that. So it's not just when you come in and do the SEL and the SEL people, I'm answering the question. Now it's 4, 5, 6, 8 months later, we're asking a question again, and we're going to share that data with them to kind of say, hey, this is what we're getting, and we can divide that by schools, by clusters, by whatever it is, grade levels, all kinds of things to give them some information. Nope, exactly the same one. We've done that for years. In fact, really don't know, we actually reduced some of the questions. We've actually reduced some of the things. In the past, our surveys were to be, they were nationally normed. We've lost that connection, and so now we're reducing the number to make it a little quicker for people to go through. But we do have those questions for multiple years.
Just wondering, in light of, again, the last couple of years, do you think it would have made sense to take a look at those questions and adapt some of the knowledge that we've garnered,
Okay.
Yeah, our team looked at that this year, and we're confident that the questions we ask are going to give us a good picture of how our students, staff, and parents perceive us and perceive their experience.
Okay. Student enrollment. We've looked at our student enrollment. 100th day, you're aware in school finance, 40th day and 100th day are the magical days. The 100th day was right around January 18th. day after January 8, right in there somewhere. But these are the enrollments for each of the pre-K 8 to high school kids. Total, as you see, our increase was 853 students, almost exactly what we predicted of half the students coming back, and that gives us a 2.4% increase, as the goal would have been 2%.
And so that last goal, just to give you an update, you're all very aware of this. I'm not going to read you the slides, but we've obviously completed our strategic plan reset just before Mr. Gay left us. The governing board approved that strategic plan. We are currently, as we look at the tasks and projects that we have spread out over our mission priorities and our transformation drivers, we currently have 2 completed projects, activities. And we have 13 in progress, and we'll continue to monitor and adjust, and as we tick things off, and we'll start adding more and progress through the next 3 to 5 years. I would say that when we talk about the impact that school funding has and AEL, our strategic plan has been designed specifically to work in combination with our ESSER funding. And we're really proud of that work, that we took both of those processes and we married those together to make sure that we had the funds and resources to be able to carry out that. One of the concerns we have specifically around our strategic plan is that if for some reason we needed to reassess where we are from a financial perspective and potentially would not have the resources to be able to carry out some of these projects. But that's part of that updating process and make sure that we're in a good financial position to be able to complete our strategic reset. And that concludes the update on where we are. I just want to conclude with a statement that you have all touched on over this evening, and specifically with our achievement data and our climate survey data. Our teachers and principals and support staff throughout the district are doing an incredible job. And when we set these goals, when I set these goals, when I asked you to approve them, we were in a different position. We had a different mindset of what the future was going to look like. And the fact that we are where we are in our progression through the year is remarkable. And it truly is because of the teachers, support staff, the principals, administrators, all the people that work to support our students every single day. It's because of them that we are where we are. If they weren't the special, talented people that they are, we'd be in a different spot. So I'm very optimistic. We have work to do in order to hit these goals. We set them; they're high goals, some right. But we set them. I came to you in the fall, and we talked about the fact that these are challenging goals, and they were challenging for a different time. And then now that we look back, again, the work that our teachers, support staff, our administrators, the way that our parents are supporting the students, and then at the end of the day, the work that our students are doing every single day is truly remarkable, and I'm very thankful for them.
Agreed. Questions, comments, Ms. Hill?
I just would like to kind of echo that as well. I mean, I am really proud of where our district is heading, and I think we're making some strides to get ourselves up to speed. And I'm one of those believers that you do want to set the bar a little high. You do. You know, I'm not going to underrate our kids. I think they're smart. I think they're talented. I think they have skills, God-given talents. You know, we just got to give them the encouragement to get where we know they should be, you know, and give them the tools. And they will rise to the occasion, you know, so I do not believe in setting the bar low. I don't. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Ms. Underhill?
No, I agree. Those are good comments. And I just want to echo what you said, that, you know, we wouldn't be where we are without the people that we have, you know, in our district, throughout our district. So I'm extremely grateful to those people. I'm also extremely hopeful. And this team here has always had hope, and that's what keeps us going. So thank you all for everything that you do.
Yeah, agreed 100%. You know, I've said it before. I mean, crisis is the great revealer, right? And it certainly reveals the quality of an organization. And you know, what this district continues to do to prioritize people over everything else is just inspiring. And then, you know, and we wouldn't be highly sought after by families, you know, on an annual basis if it wasn't for, you know, our teachers and staff at the site level, right? You know, we're a 100-plus year district, you know, I think Peoria High School is like 100 years now, something like that, 133. So our district has shifted a ton, right? And we have Old Town, and, you know, we have IRA, Murphy, Cheyenne, Peoria High School, and, you know, up to, you know, obviously Centennial and Liberty, and we're continuing to grow. And our ability to continue to shift to those shifting needs, you know, of our students and continue to address, you know, those dynamics and variable needs of our schools in Old Town and still really uphold our promise to our families, which is every student every day, right? And taking an equitable approach to ensuring the success of all of our young scholars, which means ensuring the success and wellness of all of our associates, all of our employee groups throughout the district. So, and that includes each and every one of you. So thank you for that. All I can ask is that we continue to be intentional about, you know, receiving input, you know, from our sides, from teachers, staff, students who have the greatest stake in their own education, our families. Continue to do that. I think we'll continue to make relevant decisions, and that bodes well with our mindset of continuous improvement. So, Dr. Reynolds, team, thank you. Shall we adjourn? All right. I need a motion to adjourn this meeting at 6:51.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Ms. Contry, do you want to run us through a voice vote? All in favor? Aye.